We're in the new year, and last week, every once in a while I get to go and hang out with some old college buddies of mine. And, when you hang out with old college buddies, they remember stuff you don't remember. You know what I'm talking about? People who remember you when you're like 18. And they remember stupid stuff I said that I'm like, oh my gosh, I blocked that out of my memory. And then like stupid stuff I used to like believe, and like hardcore stances I had on the issues, and just stuff like that. And it's just kind of embarrassing. But as I was with some of these friends that I've known since the year 2000, almost 2 decades now, that's when I first went to college, I was reminded actually of something really cool that I hadn't thought of in a long time. And I was actually reminded of the place and the moment where God planted in my heart for the first time what would be the vision for my ministry, and what we've kind of put into the DNA and the vision of Mosaic Conway. And it was in 2003, and I was a lot about my backstory a little bit, but I was kind of very green and naive, but I talked a lot, so everybody knew how dumb I was. Okay? When you're quiet, people don't know how dumb you are. But when you talk a lot and you don't know anything, everybody knows. All right? So I was well known for talking a lot and being kind of an idiot. And I was a good kid. I was a pretty good kid, good parents, good home, good moral kid. I was pretty self-righteous, actually. I had a lot of self-righteousness going on. I was pretty upfront about how I hadn't made any of the big mistakes, and if you had, I probably wouldn't go out with you. And, it was just a lot of bad things, but self-righteous things kind of going on in my attitude back then. And some of my friends, they were super gracious to me. I look back on them, I was like, man, they were so gracious to me. They were my friends. How did they handle me? But they invited me to go to this huge thing I'd never heard of before, where there was going to be like 50,000 college students camping outside at what I thought was a concert, okay? And so it was 2003. We went down to Sherman, Texas, and we went down. There were 50,000 college students. I remember parking miles and miles away and carrying our stuff into this massive field. As far as I could see, tents and people and college students everywhere I could look, of every nation, tribe, and tongue, and color, and background. And it was just as far as I could see, there were thousands and thousands of college students. And I was like, this is awesome. This is going to be so much fun. I'm an extrovert, by the way. I don't know if you know that. But I was just like, this is like an extrovert's dream. 50,000 students trapped on a field, like this is going to be great. We're going to be here for 3 days. So many new people to talk to. This is going to be awesome. And so we were out there, and I didn't know Texas weather could be like so crazy. I'd never really spent much time in Texas. But we were out there, and the weather was awesome, and it was great. And, no care in the world. And a concert hadn't started yet. Stuff hadn't started yet. And I went to the porta potties. There was a sea of porta potties you have to have, for that many people. And so I found my way to the porta potty village, and that's what I like to call it. And that's what you call it when you got a bunch of them. And I don't know if you've heard that before, but anyway, so I was over there, and I was in one of those porta potties, and I started hearing like screaming like I've never heard, like thousands of people screaming. And it wasn't like the good kind of screaming. It was like the bad, like there's a mass murderer running through, thousands of people kind of screaming. I mean, it was just screaming. And I came out, and I saw a black wall from the sky to the floor moving across the field, and kicking tents and blowing, like it was like sideways rolling rain. And a monsoon was rolling in, and it hit us. It just came out of nowhere, and it started just moving up. I found out later, apparently, that the eye of the storm was right over the field that we were all camping on. And it was so black, you couldn't see into it. Like, as it moved across the field, you couldn't see past it. And I realized, in a sea of 50,000 college students, that if I didn't get to my crew from the college that I came from, I wasn't going to be able to find them once the rain hit us. Like, it was going to be Black Sea chaos. So I started sprinting. People are screaming and yelling. People are like running frantically, trying to find their friends. And it just came in. And it was massive, like lightning striking the ground. And I got to my little group of like 15 of us that had come from my college, and we literally grabbed onto each other until 3 a.m. It didn't let up. I mean, I have never experienced the power of nature like I experienced that night. It was ongoing, relentless power. Like, I was like, this is scary. Like, that lightning that strikes could kill me. And it's pow, it's hitting the ground, pow, it's hitting the ground. And the rain was blowing. So we had a tarp we tried to like hold up against, like, we stood not over our head, like against the wind. We were trying to get behind the tarp against the wind just to like stay like dry. Me and my buddy, like we were like huddled together. You know, you get so vulnerable that you like don't care how close you are to somebody else. So we were like uncomfortably close. And I'm like short, so my nose is like under his armpit, you know? And like it's so loud, like you're talking to someone like this and you can't hear what they're saying because it's just screaming noise like in the back of your head. And I've never experienced power like that before. It was wild. And at 3 o'clock, it stopped instantly, like that. And I didn't know where, my clothes were gone. I don't know where they went, blown away somewhere across the field. So I'm sitting soaked with now the only pair of shirt, underwear, and shorts I've got on. And there's just stuff strewn everywhere, tents blown away. I mean, the wreckage of it was incredible. And then by 8 a.m., because it's Texas, the sun came out, dried the ground up, and the ground was as hard as a rock by 10 in the morning. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Like standing in the sea, and then next thing you know, you're standing on dry rock dirt. It was incredible. And the conference started that evening for the first time. And an old, shriveled up guy got up and taught on the bigness and the glory of God. And the two experiences of being pounded by the relentless power of nature and then a vision of God's glory from God's word that I want to show you here in a second did something in my heart that changed the trajectory of my life. And it really stirred in me, I think, the vision. We're 2020 vision. We're looking toward the future. But what's the vision? What are we aiming at? What do we see that's like a magnet that's drawing us into the future? And for as long as I've known Jesus, this vision of God has been the thing that has been drawing me into the future. It's like the thing that continues to capture my heart and pull me into the future. And we've put it into a vision statement for us. I want to show you this. Go to the next statement. It says, we see a growing multi-ethnic, generationally and economically diverse family of Christ followers being marked by God's glory, flourishing through radical grace, and living out God's global mission of redemption and reconciliation to the world. The glory of God, radical grace that comes from God to broken people, and a global mission. Now, I want to show you why that broke in my heart and why it's the vision of God that continues to pull me and I think pull us into the future that God has for us. And I want to show you this in Isaiah 6. It's a pretty well-known passage, but it's pretty mind-blowing if you think about it. Isaiah says in 6 verse 1, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne. That's God's place. That's where God lives. He's on a throne. He's a king, and he's high and lifted up. And the train of his robe, his royal robe, fills the temple. And above him stood the seraphim. These are angels on fire is what that means. Okay? So angels on fire are serving the Lord sitting on a throne. Not little wimpy angels with white wings floating around on clouds with wimpy haircuts. Okay? These are fiery angels. They're huge. And each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew, these seraphims. And they called to one another. So they're having a worship service. I don't know if you noticed this, but they're having a worship service, and they're calling to one another as they fly around the temple, okay? So the glory of God, or the train of the royal robe of God, is filling the room. So if this was the room, He'd be on the throne as high up as you can, and the train of his royal robe would wrap around the room so that there's nowhere you could go in the room without being wrapped around by the royal robe of the king. All right, there's no space where you get to have your own little throne. There's no space where you get to have your own little autonomy. There's no place you get to camp out in the temple where you get to have your own little thing going on. The robe of the royal king fills the temple. He touches it all, he sees it all, and he owns it all. The train of the robe fills the temple, and they're singing to one another. They're calling to one another. And then they say this song. It's a pretty simple song, and it's pretty awesome. It's holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the Lord of angels' armies. Holy, holy, holy. And the whole earth is full of his glory. Holy, holy, holy. The whole earth is full of his glory. So not just the temple's full of the train of his robe, but the whole earth is permeated by the glory of God. So holy, holy, holy is the song they sing. The biggest fiery angels you've ever seen in your life. They've got one song. Holy is the Lord, and his glory fills the earth. Permeates everything you could see, everything you could touch, everywhere you could go. His glory fills the earth. There is nothing on the planet that doesn't exist for God's glory. Nothing. Everything created, everything that will be created, everything that exists on the planet and in the universe exists and is full of the glory of God. And the angels say he's holy. What does that mean? It means he's perfect, he's separate, he's different, he's set apart. No one is like him. And that's what they sing over and over and over again. And Isaiah's the prophet, the holy man of Israel, and he's in the room, and he sees the glory of God. And it stuns him. Because one of the first things that happens when we see the glory of God is we realize everything that exists is about God. Everything. You're for God. Your kids exist for God. God made them. They existed. They were put into motion before the foundation of the earth for God. Your job exists for God. The city exists for God. The nations exist for God. Everything that exists for the glory of God. He's at the center of history, and everything he spoke out for God, for the glory of God. He's at the centerpiece of everything. And he's holy. He's perfect, and he's different. And Isaiah sees that it's all about him. Everything in the temple and everything on the planet is about him. It's permeated by his glory and for him. And some things begin to happen to him when he sees the centrality, the bigness, the beauty, and the weight. Glory means weight. That means it's so heavy, it's so big, you couldn't carry it. That's what glory means. And when he sees that, and that vision captures him, there's a couple things that happen. Some reality begins to stream into his life. The first reality is that maybe for the first time in his life, he saw himself clearly. Like he saw himself. Like he saw the king, he saw the glory of God, he saw the bigness of God, and in the reflection of seeing the glory and the bigness of God, he actually saw himself for the first time really clear. And how did he see himself? He goes, whoa, I'm lost. In other words, his human condition became really clear to him. I'm lost. I'm broken. I'm pursuing things much smaller than what I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at something that is at the center of everything that exists. And man, I spent a lot of my time not thinking about that. Not pursuing that, doing other stuff, chasing other things, and the things that I've chased puts me in a position where I am lost. Wow, that is what I'm supposed to be aimed at. That's the thing that's supposed to capture my imagination. That's the thing that's supposed to be the center of my thoughts in my life. I'm lost because that's not where I've been. He says, I'm lost. And he goes, I'm a man of unclean lips. And I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. And we're broken. We're pervasively broken. And we're lost. And he goes, my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of angels' armies. When we see the glory of God, when we have a vision of the glory of God, we see ourselves clearly for the first time. In fact, this is one of the reasons why the Bible continues to challenge us to look in at the person and work of Jesus and God. Because every time we look at Jesus, we see a reflection back at us. Who are we? Who are we? Because see, when I look at you and you look at me, that can be a reflection of a sort, but it's not really a very good one. If I look at you and you look at me, I can look at you and I can go, man, I'm not as good as you. Or maybe I am a little better than you. There's always somebody a little better, always somebody a little worse, and I can get a lot of identity about positioning myself somewhere in the social place about how good I am and what mistakes I've made and what mistakes I haven't made, and you've made mistakes and I've made mistakes, and if I could categorize those right, then I can kind of build an identity out of placing myself somewhere in the middle of you. And you can do that with me. But when we see God, it changes everything. And for the first time, we see ourselves exactly who we are. But if we stay in Isaiah's place, Isaiah sees the glory of God and he goes, whoa, I'm broken, I'm lost, I'm a man of unclean lips, I'm small. I've pursued small things. I haven't pursued the King of glory. But if we stay there, then I'm not sure we've really seen the glory of God. Because in the reality of seeing God for who he is, something radical moves in our direction. He goes, I'm unclean and my people are unclean. But then one of the fiery angels flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth and he said, behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin is atoned for. That's radical grace. That's radical grace. Hey, I see you exactly as you are. Here's what the angel didn't say. He didn't say, oh man, your mouth is fine. Oh, that trashy stuff that's been coming out of your heart, ain't no big deal. It's fine. Ain't nothing wrong. If you felt like it was right, it was right. No, that's not what he says at all. He takes the coal, a burning coal, and he puts it on his lips. And he says, your guilt is taken away and your sin is paid for, atoned for. Now, if you were with us in Advent, you know that Isaiah is the most messianic prophet of the Old Testament. In other words, all through the book of Isaiah, Isaiah is looking toward the Messiah. There's a king coming. There's a king coming. There's a Messiah coming. There's a rescue coming. And we read through it all through Advent. It's the one where the virgin birth is first talked about in Isaiah 7. We saw that in the last week before Christmas, that a virgin was going to come and a rescue was going to come and rescue the people of God. So Isaiah is seeing what he's been seeing over and over and over again. There's a rescue coming. There's a rescue coming. And in this moment, he sees the rescue in the symbol of a coal that comes toward him. He knows no piece of rock is going to take his sin away. He knows no piece of rock can pay for his sin. What's he know? He knows that there is a Messiah coming who will stand in his place on a cross, die for the sins of the world, and atone for his guilt. He knows that. He can see it, and he experiences it through the coal. So here's two amazing truths that always go together in the heart of God. God wants us to see him for who he is. He doesn't want us to whittle him down to something small. He doesn't want to make him my size and your size. Get him down to where he thinks like us and acts like us and does what we do and has the same frailties. He doesn't want us to whittle him down. He wants us to see him how he is. But in the moment we see him as he is, and we realize that in relationship to him, we are rebellious, broken, hurting, small people. In that moment, he wants us to experience grace. And if we don't experience grace, we probably haven't really seen him as he is. Now, if we can also see him without any sense of our own brokenness, if we can be in the presence of God, hear his word, and our heart isn't convicted about areas of rebellion and brokenness, we probably haven't really seen him there either. They happen together. They happen together where we see the glory of God, and in seeing the glory of God, we see ourselves and our need for God, and then we experience radical grace, and it moves in our direction. And then if those two things happen, and this is why this is a magnet that keeps drawing us into the future, because if I see a view of God that shades everything that I look at now, and I see my own dependence on God, we got God, we need you, we know you, we can't do anything without you, so we see our dependence on God. God responds to his children with radical grace, guilt taken away, sin atoned for at the bloody cross. And a very simple thing comes out of the heart of Isaiah in that moment. He hears the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" And he said, "Here am I, send me." Because if we've seen who God really is, like really who he is, if he has captured our imagination, and we've seen our desperate need for him to atone for our sin and remove our guilt and to embrace us. See, that's where our worth comes from. Our worth comes from being embraced by God. God made us. He bought us. He embraces us. But he doesn't embrace us by making himself smaller. He embraces us by showing us how big he is and then coming in our direction and healing us. And if those two things happen for us, it always, without exception, puts us in motion. Always. There is no such thing as a Christian who has experienced the glory of God, genuinely recognized their sin, and cling to God for the grace that he provides, that doesn't put that person in motion. A person not in motion is a person who hasn't experienced radical grace and who does not know who God is. That's the only way you can sit around. If you know who he is and you've been gathered together by his grace, come alive to your worth and who you are as a child of God, you will be in motion. It's like automatic. It just happens. You're being pulled toward a fuller view of God. You're a pursuer of more of the grace of God. And then your deepest desire is that the people who live in a land who do not know the glory of God and have not experienced the compassion and grace and mercy that comes toward them, do not know their worth to him, do not know that he bought them with his blood, do not know that he provides an opportunity for them to experience mercy and forgiveness from their sin, and they don't know that, your heart cries out to say, I gotta go. God's spoken words, and I gotta take them. There is no such thing as a person who's experienced God's glory and his grace and then doesn't go. You won't find it anywhere in Scripture. People who know who God is and come alive to their value and worth in being forgiven and accepted and embraced always go. Always. And it's the thing that draws us into the next future of pursuing others who do not know the mercy and grace of God and do not see him in all his glory. And so, it's an interesting thing. You say, well, Chuck, I don't know about that. If you fast forward to Jesus continually does this all the time. He shows up to people in the human flesh, and people have this awe about them when they see Jesus. He's a man with authority. He's a man who can heal. He's a man who calms the waves. He's a man who the demons even listen to him. And yet he encounters people like the woman at the well who's been divorced 5 times. is the laughingstock of the town and a Samaritan no less, which means that Jews kind of view them as kind of half-breeds and pagans. And he meets her at the well, and you're not supposed to talk to women at the well, and he meets her at the well, and he knows that she's been married 5 times, which ought to push somebody into shame, but doesn't push her into shame, draws her into being accepted and valued and loved and forgiven. And what does she do in John chapter 4, verse 28? Check this out. She left her water jar after talking to Jesus, and she went into the town, and she said, what? Come and see. You know, Jesus didn't tell her, go tell him to come and see. He just showed up, loved her, showed him how awesome he was, showed her that he provided everything she needed for the longing of her soul. And when she experienced that in him, she got up, she put her water down, she went back into the city, and she said, you need to come see this guy. He told me everything that's ever been told about me. I think he's the Messiah. I think he's the Christ. An experience of the glory of God and the grace of God always sends us out to go on the mission of God. Always. Never fails. And it happens like a loop. In other words, God's always gathering his people back together to reveal himself through his word, to reveal himself through the singing of his people, through revealing himself through nature and beauty and art. And he's just gathering together. This is how big I am. This is how beautiful I am. And people see that his glory permeates everything. And then they realize that I'm a sinner. And so they come back and they repent. And they ask for God's healing. And they receive his grace. And they step up in confidence knowing they belong to God. And they go. They always go. They always step out because they want that same experience for everyone on the planet, knowing that everybody on the planet was created for the glory of God and with a relationship, for a relationship with God. And that's what happens with the woman at the well. So there are some things, I think, for us that this pushes us toward in 2020. Some really cool things, I think. One is I want to challenge us this year to be a people who fanatically, without exception, stop and celebrate everywhere we see the bigness and the beauty of God at work around us. See, what sin does is sin wants to blind our eyes to see it. And so people redeemed by God are people who are awake to seeing it everywhere. So I want to see it in you when God works in you in a powerful way. I want to see it in the beautiful mountains that I just was out in Colorado. I want to see it in the way that you serve other people in ways that are selfless and sacrificial. I just want to be someone who fanatically points at and celebrates. You see, God, that's big, that's huge, that's amazing, that's beautiful. I want to get out of my narrow focus that life is all about me. I want to lift my eyes up and I want to look everywhere. If the whole earth is full of the glory of God, I want to see the glory of God everywhere I go. I want to be a people who celebrate and point to that constantly. And I want to challenge us to do that. 2, I want us to cling, and this is challenging in our culture. I want us to cling to the holiness and their perfection and the bigness of God. Let's not whittle God down. And we don't have to apologize for him. Hey, listen, if there's stuff you read about in the Bible, stuff I read about in the Bible that's hard for me to explain and hard to put together, and how God could be good and allow that to happen, and these big, huge mysteries of the power of God and these crazy events that happens that are recorded in the Bible, and I'm having a hard time maybe reconciling all of that, and even with a seminary degree, I just be honest with you, my mind doesn't understand all the mysteries of a big God. I don't, but I'm not going to apologize for him. Ouch. Somebody hit their head back there. I'm not going to apologize for the holiness and perfection and the bigness and the mystery of a God that I'm not supposed to be able to fully explain. How he holds human history in his hand and allows for human choice. How he rules over the good and the evil. How he blesses sometimes those who do evil and crushes the righteous sometimes who trust in him. I don't know all the mysteries, but I will not apologize for the bigness and the beauty and the holiness of God. I will proclaim it and I'll hang on to it. He's God and he doesn't need me to defend his honor. He doesn't. He's big. So I'm going to cling to that. Number 3, we will let's see here, 3, skipped one there. We will, in the middle of hanging on to God's holiness and hanging on to his righteousness and his bigness, we will also extend grace. We will be people who, when people encounter us, they will experience compassion again and again and again and again. They may come around. There are a lot of people who will not come through the front door. And they talk to me all the time because I like to hang out in places where people don't realize that I'm a pastor until we're about 30 minutes into the conversation. And then they're like, oh, man, I'm sorry. I've been cussing the whole time. And I'm like, it's okay. At the gym, they tell them not to apologize in front of me because I've also messed up. And so people say to me over and over and over again that God would strike the building if they were in here. Do you know what perception of that is of God in the Bible Belt? It's a perception of God that says, I think maybe God is all-powerful, but he doesn't have much compassion for somebody who doesn't have it together or someone who's failed as much as I have. So I don't want the roof to come down, and I don't want lightning to strike, so maybe when I get my life together, I'll walk into the building. Not knowing it's at the epicenter of God's mercy and grace is when we see his glory. That when we see him in all his bigness and fierceness and power, it's at the place of there going, I'm small and weak and dependent, that his grace comes rushing in. So we need to demonstrate that, not by making God small and weak and a God who doesn't care about anything, but by telling them about a God who cares about everything and owns everything, and then in the middle of it has grace and mercy and compassion for every broken thing you know about and every broken thing you're hiding. He knows, and he's compassionate, and he comes close. We need to be people who regularly, consistently offer compassion and mercy everywhere we encounter, whether it's in ourselves. That's many of you guys, you punish yourself every day because you think you know better. You think you know better, you think you've done better, you think you know the rules, you should be working harder. So when I say, hey, would you help out in this leadership role? You go, yeah, but you don't know that I'm actually weak in this area and I'm kind of a failure in this area. And so it's like, well, but you know that I am too, right? And you go, yeah, but you don't know, I should know better. Oh, come on. Allow the grace of God to rush into your life. And then extend it to your neighbor, and extend it to your city, and extend it everywhere you see brokenness. Extend grace. Number 4, work hard to serve and lay down our lives for our neighbors. See, the cold represents Jesus. And what does Jesus do? He comes from his throne and he lays down his life. So how do you put the glory of God on display and at the same time extend grace to broken people? You serve and lay down your life. Every time we do that, we put God on display and we extend grace. We serve and we lay down our lives. And number 5, courageously. And I know this is hard in our culture because we're autonomous and we think everybody's kind of doing what they want to do, and they are. We courageously invite people into the community of faith because it's in the community of faith where we put this thing at the center. We slow down all the other busyness and we put it at the center. We're attempting to make Mosaic. We strive for this gathering to be God-centered so that his glory is on display, that his grace is extended, that people are called to repentance. And so courageously invite. Stop being scared that nothing will happen when people see God. That's my big fear. My big fear is if I invite somebody and they walk in and the big God that has captured my attention won't capture theirs. And so because I'm afraid of that, I don't invite them. Come on, let God do his own thing. Let's invite them in. Let's be courageous to invite people in. And then let's do our best to continue to create an environment where the bigness of God is sung about and the bigness of God is taught about and the grace of God is extended again and again and again. We can't talk about these things and then not invite people to come in and experience it. So let's courageously invite. And then one thing we're going to practically do, and I'm almost done here, is for this next season, we're going to turn our teaching focus to the person and the work of Jesus in the book of Mark. And what we're going to do in the book of Mark is, 2 Corinthians tells us that Jesus is the image and the glory of God. And so what we're going to do is for this next season, we're going to teach through the book of Mark, and we're going to look at Jesus because Jesus is at the center. He's the fiery, hot center of the perfection of God and the grace of God and the mission of God. And we're going to look at him week after week after week. And this is going to help us in a lot of ways. One, it's going to help us continually focus our attention on Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. But secondly, it's going to allow us to invite people who do not know Jesus, who maybe they think they've heard about Jesus, or they think about the church. You know, a lot of people go, well, the church and Jesus, the church is bad, maybe Jesus is good. But nobody really knows what Jesus is saying. They don't know because they haven't heard, even in the Bible Belt. So we're going to spend this next season looking in at the person, work, and the words of Jesus, and continually ask ourselves to see him as he is in all of his glory, to recognize our need for him, and to go on the same mission he's on. And so we're looking at 2020. It's like a vision of God that draws us into the future. So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to move to the table. God, it's really hard to see you through the selfish, self-centered lens that we wear a lot. Sometimes it's really hard to see you through the pain of our broken lives. Sometimes it's hard to just see that it's not all about us. But God, it isn't all about us, and that's a really good thing, because when it's about you, you are doing amazing things. You're satisfying the longings of our heart. You're healing the most broken places of our soul, and you're restoring the world. So God, would you allow us to see you at the center of it all? And then would you allow us to see ourselves as people who are nothing without you? And then would you stir our heart to walk out the mission of calling the world to come awake to your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.